So to start making our game, we have to make a new project. So we need to make sure that Unity is open. We're going to click on this new button on the top right, and now we have to set the project name and location. The project name is going to be Whack-A-Mole, and the location is going to be this projects folder that is under my home folder. Okay, don't just use the documents or the desktop folder, as you're going to mix your games with things that make no sense. So let's start by having things organized, by having a projects folder, or workspaces if you prefer. For the rendering mode, we're going to leave 3D enabled, as we're going to work with virtual reality, and we can leave Unity Analytics disabled. And after this, we're going to click Create Project and just wait for Unity to set everything up. So before we jump into making any code or making any visual elements here, we need to take a quick look on the Unity editor. So we're going to understand the tools we have available. So in the top left, we have the hierarchy window. This is basically going to list all the game objects that are in the scene. And a game object is the most basic entity when you're making a game. So that game object could be a light, could be a camera, it could be a player, a bullet, or it could be also something that is invisible. It could be something that controls the game. So it's basically a very simple entity there's going to be in your game. And in this case, we have two game objects already set for us. We have a main camera and we have a directional light. We're going to look at them shortly. If you look at the middle of the Unity editor, you're going to see the scene window selected here. And this window, this is like the gates for from the developer to the scene of the game, okay, to the virtual worlds that we're going to develop here. So this scene, this view that we have here, we can even look to the left, the right, top, bottom. You can do this by just right-clicking with your mouse, and you notice that the icon changed. And if you drag your mouse around, you're able to look in the scene window. Okay, you can look to all directions that you want. And while you are in this viewing mode, you can even use some keys to move around, so you can navigate to whatever you want. If you press W, A, S, and D, you can just start moving around like you are in a first-person shooter game. So if you have ever played any shooter games in a computer, you should be familiar with these controls. But if you didn't, don't worry, you get used to it pretty quickly as you develop games. Okay, and also very useful is Q and E to move up and down. Okay, so right now we have two game objects in here. We have the directional light that we can see here in the hierarchy as well. And we also have a camera. Okay, notice that in this tutorial we are dealing with two cameras right now. There's the developer camera in the scene window, okay, so you can look at different places, and you have a camera in your scene. Okay, this is going to be the main camera for this game. And if you have it selected, you notice that there's a camera preview box here on the bottom right of the scene window. So it's a bit small. What if you want to have a better look at this? We just click on the game window. What you see here is exactly what the players are going to see once you play the game. Okay, so if you're working with Unity and you generate a build for an iOS, Android device, a smart TV, or a VR device, whatever you see here is the simulation of the game. Okay, it's what the players are going to see. All right. So basically, this camera object that we see here, notice that there's a small rectangle. It's like this is regarding the viewing places of this camera. Okay, these gray arrows, they determine how far or how close you can look at objects. Okay. So if you go now to the right portion of the Unity editor, there's the inspector window. This is basically going to show you details of whatever you have selected. So since we don't have anything selected right now, this is pretty much empty. But if we choose the directional light, for example, you're going to see that there's lots of information here now. Okay, so let's take a look on them one by one. First, we have the game object's name. Okay, even though this is a light, before being a light, this is a game object. This is in your scene. And you can see the name here. There are the settings tag and layer. We don't need to worry about them right now. But notice that down here we have a list with two elements. Okay, these elements, they're called components. They're things that are going to change how your game object is going to behave. So the first of them is a transform component. And if you expand the transform component, you're going to see three fields: position, rotation, and scale. The position field is going to determine where this game object is going to stand in this 3D world. So right now the position is 0, 3, 0. The x value is the horizontal value, so if you move this to a positive number, it's going to go to the right. If you move this to a negative number, it's going to move to the left. And if it's on 0, it's going to be in the default position in the scene. Y works more or less the same thing, but it's the vertical axis now. If it's a positive value, it's going to move up. If it's negative, it moves down. And for Z is the depth axis. Okay, we can see it better if we look from the top here. So if you increase Z, the light is going to move forward, and if you decrease it, it moves backwards, right? And notice that we can also move this light by using these guides here. Okay, we can use these arrows or click on these squares to move on two axes at once. Okay, and this can be done because we have the moving tool selected here in the top left above the hierarchy window. Now, what if we want to change the rotation of the light? We can just deal with these numbers here. Right now, it's 50 minus 30, 0. But if you change the rotation on X, okay, you notice that the moving arrows that we have here in the light, they start to rotate around the x-axis. Okay, and we can even see the sun setting when you move the directional light. Okay, so we can do this on X, we can do this on Y, and we can do this on Z as well. Okay, and we also have the scale property, but it won't work with the light because it's something abstract. Okay, it's like the sun, you won't change the size of that. And another component that we have here is the actual light. So you can change things like how this light is going to be rendered, what is going to be the color that is going to be rendered on top of the 3D elements that we're going to have here, how are the shadows going to be rendered. So we could spend a whole lesson talking just about light, but if you want to have a very quick look on this, you can just pause the video and change these values to see how they affect the game. You can learn a lot by just experimenting with these lighters and numbers in here. And we also have the camera. Okay, so we have the transform like we had with our directional light, but we also have a camera component here. Okay, so we can set how the rendering mode is going to be. If it's going to use a skybox, or if you want to use a solid color, whatever you prefer, but we're going to leave skybox here. And we can also change the background color. And again, we can change other things like the field of view, for example. But you can leave the default values, they're going to work just fine for our game. And finally, in the bottom left of the editor, we have a project window, which contains a link to the assets folder. And this folder is going to contain all the files that are going to be used in your game. So there are going to be scripts, there are going to be audio, images, animations, 3D models, and lots of things are going to be present here. So basically files. It's a link between your project and external files. And we also have a console window here, console tab. And here you can see information regarding the game in general. So if there are any mistakes that you made, if you made any mistakes in your code, or if there's an assignment that didn't work properly, if there are any warnings so we can optimize the code, or if you manually print information, it's all going to be in the console window. Okay, so that's pretty much it to see the Unity editor. And now if you hit the play button, you notice that the editor darkens a little bit and the game window is automatically focused. Okay, so that means that the game is live right now. What you see here is what the players are going to see being executed in their phones or in any other devices. However, nothing special here is happening. We didn't implement the logic just yet, and also we didn't work on activating the virtual reality mode. So let's work on activating the virtual reality. To do this, for Google Cardboard, we need to go to this website, developers.google.com/vr/Unity. So you're taken straight to the Unity section of the VR. Okay, we have other platforms here as well, but Unity, since we're working with Unity, of course, we're going straight to this page. This page is filled with information regarding this SDK, so you can see the features, the limitations, what are the requirements that you're going to need to use this SDK. So it's important to take a quick look here and read all the information that we have here. Okay, and in the bottom of the page we have two important links. We have Unity API reference, which is going to list you info about the classes and properties, methods, and variables that you're going to use in this SDK. And we also have this link here, download the Google VR SDK for Unity. We're going to click it, and in this new page it's going to request us to download to clone the repository, okay, the Git repository for Google VR. But we're going to make things simple. We're going to click on this link here, GVR Unity SDK, to go straight to the GitHub webpage. And here we're going to click on Google VR for Unity.unity package. And after that, we just have to press the download button. So we're going to have the exact file that we need. And once we go to the downloads folder, we have this Google VR for Unity.unity package. So now we just double click it, wait for it to uncompress, and we're going to see this window in the Unity editor. It's the import Unity package. So Unity package files, they work like zip files. They are a collection of several other files, dozens and even hundreds of files. Okay, so we have images, scenes, audio, there are lots of things in here. And well, there's no need for us to work on these things from scratch. Okay, we already have a library available for us, so we don't need to worry too much about this. Okay, we just use it with no need to reinvent the wheel. Okay, so we need to make sure that all the folders are selected. They should be by default. And now we press the import button. So the package is going to uncompress and the necessary files are going to be added to our assets folder. And for any Unity version that you use, depending on the version that you are working and depending on the VR SDK that you're using, it might request you to import another Unity package just to ensure compatibility. And when it does, you just can accept that. You just press import package and wait for this uncompression to happen and press import again. And we should be good to go. We now have two folders, Google VR and plugins. If you go to the Google VR folder, there are going to be lots of other things here, like demo scenes, for example. This is interesting to see how it works. But we're going to the prefabs folder now, and we're going to use this prefab here, GVR Viewer Main. A prefab is a game object that has been saved for later reusing. Okay, so we don't need to set up an object to activate VR mode. It is already available for us. And to use this prefab in our game, we just have to drag and drop it in the hierarchy. So if you look at the hierarchy, we have this GVR viewer main game object. You notice that it is blue because it's a prefab instance. Okay, it's a copy of this guy here. And if you look at the inspector, it's basically a very simple game object which contains the transform component and a GVR viewer script component. So you can change things here, like if you want to enable or disable the VR mode, if you want to change the screen size. Okay, it's for example, if you don't own a Google Cardboard but you still want to play the game, you can just disable the VR mode and use your device's gyroscope. Okay, and just by doing that, if you press the play button, we're going to see this window here. It's much different than before. Okay, before we had only one rectangle here that drew the game, but this time we have two. This is done by the VR SDK. If you look at the camera, it has been split into two cameras, the left one and the right one. That's why we have two, and it simulates. It gives us the illusion that we are in the virtual reality scene because we have one camera per eye, and they're set apart by a few centimeters. Okay, and to look around, you can just hold the Alt key and move your mouse to the left, to the right. Okay, it could be the Option key as well if you are on a Mac. So you just move left, right, top, bottom. Okay, you don't need to regenerate a build every time to test your game. You can do everything here in the Unity editor. And since we're going to work on a whack-a-mole game, it's interesting to have a crosshair, just to make sure that we're aiming at the proper places. And to activate a crosshair, we just have to go to Google VR, Prefabs, UI, and we're going to use this GVR reticle. We can just drag and drop it in the main camera. Okay, and if you play the game again, the reticle should be pointing to whatever you're looking. Okay, so we have this white dot here. Alright, so this should be everything that we need to work on. And in the next class, we should make a very simple scene. Okay, we're going to make a very simple table and a very simple mole that we're later going to hit. Before we work with the final art, okay, with the beautiful art, it is interesting to understand how 3D primitives work in Unity. So we're going to deal with very simple cubes and spheres, okay, and it's very important for us because we're going to get used to how shapes work in Unity and to navigate and set positions and understand about hierarchy, okay. Even though it's not the final art, this practice is very important so we get faster over time. So what we want to do is to make a very simple table. So in the hierarchy, we're going to right click, we're going to select create empty, and notice that we have an empty game object here. So in the inspector, we're going to rename this game object to table, and we're going to set its position to 0, 0, 0. We do this because the table is now in the middle of the scene, in the middle of the world. Okay, so it's going to be right here. And later, we're going to make the player to be closer to this table. So now that we have this, let's make our first visual primitive. We're going to right click, selecting the table, go to 3D object and then cube. And once we do this, we have a very simple white cube in the game. Okay, so we made our first shape. Let's take a look on the inspector. We have the transform component as usual. Almost all game objects contain this, and we have other components in here. We have a mesh filter, which contains the 3D data for the cube shape. We have a box collider, which is used for physical collisions. Okay, so when things hit themselves, the box collider is used. And we also have a mesh render, and this is an important component because if you don't have it, you notice that the cube is now invisible. Okay, we just have some green outlines for the collider, but the renderer is the actual thing that draws the mesh. Okay, so we need to have this enabled. And what if we want to change the color of this cube? We're going to deal with the renderer as well. Most specifically, we're going to deal with its materials. Okay, because the renderer draws the mesh, but the materials, they shade the shapes. Okay, so you might apply a metallic effect. Maybe if you want to add some transparency or change the color, you need to deal with the material. And right now we have the default material, and that is because we've basically created a simple shape and it uses a material already provided by Unity. So we need one of our own. So to do this, let's go to the project window, make sure the assets folder is selected. We're going to right click, select create and then material, and we're going to name this table material and hit enter. And if you go to the inspector, you notice that the material has been selected here. And now we just want to change its color. So I'm going to choose a dark brown like this one, okay, more or less dark. And to apply this material to this cube, we just drag and drop it here. Okay, so we've changed the color of the cube. And now let's make this look like an actual table. So let's make the main part of it first. We're going to change the scale on X to be 2. Okay, already at 3. The Y scale, let's use something to make it thin, so 0.1. And Z, we can use 3 as well. Okay, but however, the table is on kind of an invisible floor because it's its position 0 on Y. So let's change that to 1, so the table stands up a little bit. Okay, and now we want to make the base for the table. So we're going to duplicate this cube by right clicking on it and selecting duplicate, and we're going to change its position to 0.5 on Y. The scale on Y is going to be 1, and the scale on X and Z is going to be 1. Okay, so the table is going to look like this. Okay, it's very simple. We are no need to add 4 legs here, just one cube in the middle. Okay, it shares the same material as this part, and this is what we're going to use to make the molds come out. Okay, so we have this cube, this one, and now we just have to design the molds. And notice that it is important to keep the hierarchy in mind right in the beginning, because now if we want to move the table, we don't have to select these two components at once. Okay, we can even forget they exist. You just click on the table game object and you're able to drag them around, okay, both at once. It's like the table works as a folder for 2 files. If you move the folder, the 2 files go along. Okay, so we have a very basic table. And now we want to add some divisions in here because this is where the molds are going to come out. So to do this, let's duplicate this cube that we added here. Okay, the first one, which is the base of this table. We're going to right click and select duplicate, and for this to work better we can use this tool here. This is a resizing tool, but it's like we're working with 2D elements. Okay, so we're able to resize them better. Let's change the scale to 0.2 on Y, and if we look on the side of this table, you notice that there are some knobs in here, some guides that we can choose. So if we click and drag, we're going to resize this as we are dealing with a 2D object. Okay, so we can make it look like this. Okay, we can even use these numbers that we have here. We can just change them, but it's easier to just use these two when resize things. Okay, now we're going to duplicate what we just did, and we're going to mirror its position in the horizontal axis. Instead of minus 1.42, it's going to be positive 1.42. So we have these in here. Okay, now we duplicate that again. We're going to change the rotation on Y to be 90, and we want to change the position on X and Z. Okay, we're going to set X as 0, and this value is going to move to Z. So it's going to be this and then this. Okay, so we are finishing the shape of the table. And now we duplicate that once more, and we can change its Z position instead of 1.42 to minus 1.42. So it looks like this. And it's interesting to change the color as well for this. So let's make another table material. Right click in the assets panel, create material, table to material. And we're going to give this a lighter color, actually a darker color. I think it's going to work better. Just give a nicer contrast. Okay, so we have this, and notice that we would have to drag and drop to all of these parts that we just added, but there's an easier way. Okay, if you select all of the 4 parts that you added, okay, by just clicking on one of them, holding Ctrl or Command and selecting all of them, if you go to the mesh render and you expand the materials property, you can just drag table to material in here, and all of them are going to receive this material that we created. Okay, and now we can add the final divisions in here. We're going to duplicate this cube, and we're going to change it to a position more or less here, so that's minus 0.44. I'm going to duplicate that again and set it to positive 0.44. So we divided this into 3 parts. We do the same thing vertically. So we grab this one. Okay, let me choose it. Okay, cube 5. We're going to duplicate that and set Z to 0.44 as well. Duplicate that once more, and that's going to be minus 0.44. So we have some sort of checkerboard here, and these are the places where the molds are going to come out. Okay, so we are done with the table in here. Now, for the molds, it is interesting to have a game object that is going to contain all of the molds, like we did with the table. So we're going to right click here, select create empty. So we have this game object here. Let's set its position to 0, 1, 0. Okay, so Y is going to be right over the table in here. And what we want to do is we want to rename this to mold container. It's going to look like this. Okay, and now we're going to make one sample mold. Okay, we're going to right click on mold container, select 3D object, and let's use capsule. Okay, you notice that you're going to have a capsule shape, but it's a bit too big right now, of course. Let's change its scale to 0.3 on X, 0.3 on Y, and 0.3 on Z. Okay, so it's going to look like this. We can even make it bigger on the X and Z axis. So maybe 0.5 on X and 0.5 on Z. It's going to look like this. Okay, and we want to rename this as mole. Okay, a very simple one, and we can leave the full material here. It can be white just as it is right now. Okay, let's just increase its height a little bit to 0.4. Maybe, okay, 0.2 is going to work well. So the thing that we want to do here is this mole that we just created is going to be replicated 8 times. So we're going to have a total of 9 moles in this game, and they're going to appear in random time intervals. So we could just duplicate this mole and add it here, and then every change we do with the mole we have to apply 9 times, but there's a smarter way to do this. Just like we used the GVR viewer main, we can transform the mole into a prefab so we can easily reuse it later. And to create a prefab, we can just drag this mole that we just created and drop in project, okay, in the assets panel. So now notice that we have a mole entry in here, okay, if you look at this mole.prefab file, and the mole that we had in our hierarchy is now blue because this is a prefab instance. It's a copy of the original prefab. Okay, and now that we did this, we're going to duplicate this mole, and we're going to set its X position to be 0. Let me check here, to 0.9 on X. We're going to duplicate that again and set it to minus 0.9. So we have 3 moles in here. We can choose all of them at once and duplicate them and set the position on Z to be 0.9. Once again, we duplicate the 3 you have selected and change Z to minus 0.9. So we have all of our 9 moles in here, okay? And what is going to happen when we code this game is these moles, they're going to move down like this to a vertical position, and one by one they're going to appear and then disappear, and you have to try to hit them as quick as you can, okay, before they hide from you. Okay, so we have 9 moles in here. Okay, so now that we've finished this design, notice something. Okay, what if we want to change the size of a mole? Okay, we can just grab the first mole that we had here and change y to 0.4, for example. So we change the size of this specific mole in the middle. Okay, let me just make it a bit taller just so it's easier. Okay, just for testing purposes. Let's use 0.6 and then 0.6 and 0.6. Okay, it'll look like this. And if we want to replicate what we just did to the other moles, we have to save this prefab, okay? Because remember, this is an instance. This is not the actual prefab. So you have to apply the changes that you did here so the others can mimic it. To do this, you just click the apply button and notice that all of the others, they were updated. Their sizes were updated. Okay, so just for testing purposes, let me change that back to as it was before. Check here, I think it was 0.5, 0.3, 0.5. Then we hit apply and all of them are back to their normal size. Okay, that's pretty much what we're going to do with prefabs. Okay, so now that we have done this, all of this table, to make sure that we are not going to lose our work, we have to save the scene. So we're going to hit File, Save Scene, and we're going to name this as game.unity. You're going to see that we have a new file here, game.unity, in our assets folder. So, okay, now that we have this, in the next video we're going to work on making the camera to understand the things that are in this scene. Okay, so we're able to look around and say, okay, we are looking at a mole. Okay, we do this in the next video.